What's going on, everybody? It's your boy QuestX. You guys know from the title what this video is going to be about, and let me just talk about this gentleman right here on the screen, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and why I feel that ever since this Tyrese situation has spiraled out of control, I'm starting to see a lot of The Rock apologists out there who are, The Rock is just making his money. He's just doing him. The Rock is this cool guy. He's this, he's that. All right. Let me give you a little bit of back history from my perspective and my experience and my personal experience with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. This is my personal experience with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to sit there and whatever. You can thumbs down this video now because it's not a positive one. All right? And I'm going to keep it completely 100 across the board when it comes to what my experience has been with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson personally. I'm going to give you two examples of one is a personal experience and the other is a friend of mine who works in the hair and makeup industry and who works with a lot of these actors and actresses. My first personal experience, I'm going to tell you my personal experience, and then I'm going to tell you about this woman's personal experience that I know. Back in the day, I was a fan of the WWF, World Wrestling Federation, during the Attitude Era, probably one of the best and golden years of wrestling, in my opinion. All right, now if you talk to older cats who were when Hulk Hogan first came on, and Randy Macho Man Savage, all those different, there is a debate as to which was the better era in wrestling, all right? But that's for wrestling historians, and that's for another video. But to give you a little bit of my background when it comes to this. Now, I grew up in New Jersey. Everybody knows that by now. We have a town in New Jersey called Ridgewood, New Jersey, and there was this comic book shop in Ridgewood, which is located on what we used to call the Strip. The Strip was pretty much what it is. It's a few blocks of stores that never closed, or rather was like kind of the hot spot to go after school and at night. There was a comic book shop in which he was supposed to be there along with two other wrestlers, and they were there gonna sign stuff because at the time there was a makeshift comic book which was for the WWF, and he was gonna sign and be there and take pictures with fans and whatever have you. There was a line stretched out the door, well, from the door around the block. Now we're not talking about a normal block. This was literally, the store was located in the middle, I want to say in the middle of the block, and it stretched all the way around down the street, almost 3 or 4 houses back. And this was like ridiculous. You had to get there early, which me and my friends did because we were those die-hard nerds and into the WWF. I do not watch wrestling anymore. It is completely cheesy and god-awful. The storylines are god-awful in my opinion. And they don't allow you to do certain things that in the era I grew up in, you were allowed to do. But, okay, so me and my friends, we get there. We're just like, yo, we're going to meet The Rock, and, he's going to do the if you smell what The Rock is cooking and the people's eyebrow. And we were all like, again, really official nerds. So we're there and we're waiting. Let me tell you about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. When we get there and we wait online, we waited for about an hour and 40 minutes. And this is no lie. It actually started to rain a little bit during that day, and we waited. He A, showed up late. B, was absolutely irritable. He was nasty to people. He only wanted to take certain pictures from certain sides. He didn't want to, when we would sit there and try to say, hey, can we ask you a couple questions? He was like, next. He wanted to go. Mind you, this is all his prerogative, right? I mean, you might be saying this is all his prerogative. But here's the funny thing about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And this goes into my bigger issue with him, because how he plays both sides of the fence. All right? They had, and I kid you not, and people are going to sit here and say, oh, well, you lying, man, you lying. They had somebody there, I guess it was his PR guy at the time, was like, we need 3 black people, 3 white people, and 3 Spanish people. And they picked out 3 black people, 3 Spanish people, 3 white people, and they all took pictures with him. And at the time, as a kid, I didn't understand what that was about. Now, growing up, I know what that was about. That was about him and his PR guys trying to publicize that, look, he's a star for everyone. Now, you might be saying, oh, that's not a big deal. Okay, but that leads into the bigger picture of who he is and how he has operated in Hollywood and moving forward. Okay? Because it all informs you of why he does what he does. So, and then on top of that, doing that, I felt like a little put off by that. I was like, man, like, why don't you just take pictures with your fans? Why do you have to divide up by race as to who's taking this picture, who's taking that picture, right? All right, so you move on from that. You figure, all right, whatever. Now, at the time, one of my buddies who was like this huge rock fan, he was like the hugest rock fan. I mean, he had before it was Fatheads, he had like the huge posters throughout his room, everything. That day when he met him and how nasty he was and how rude he was to him, I never forget this. My boy told me, he was like, yo, I'm never supporting anything this dude is a part of again, because he's a dick. Like, you don't pull dick moves towards guys, your fans who've been waiting for you for like hours. So I told him, I was like, dude, you being too emotional about this. You know, move on from it. Is like, it's all fake anyway. Like, I was a huge wrestling fan, but I was never one of those real crazy ass fuckers who was like, oh, this shit is real, son. This shit is real. You die in the ring. You can die in the ring. Accidents do happen, but for the most part, it's always been scripted. I always knew that. I always had that fundamental. I was a weird kid. I was into fantasy stuff, but I understood it was fantasy. I wasn't like those people who kind of like live in that stuff. But, you know, I told him, yo, dude, you being mad emotional about it. Yo, stop crying like a little girl. Move on. That's it. Now, just so happens, fast forward years later, I'm in college. I meet a girl. She's telling me about how, like, oh, you know, I want to go into the, you know, I think what I really want to do is be a colorist specialist and makeup effects specialist. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. That's a lot of, like, I was like, I don't know much about it. I mean, I was a fan of Stan Winston. And if anybody knows who Stan Winston was, he was like the god of horror special effects, VFX. And I was like, yo, that's insane. And so she ended up going more of the makeup specialist and colorist and makeup. They have a show on Sci-Fi Channel which does it. I can't remember what it's called, but where they do special effects and VX effects on sets. She was more of that type of person. So I meet her. We become friends. She then later on goes to San Diego, California, gets her degree. Then she starts working on movie sets. And you guys don't have to believe me, but this is the truth, the God honest truth. All right. She then tells, when we run in, we like, you know, we stay in each other's orbit. But, you know, at the time she was having her life over there on the West Coast. And at the time, and I'll never forget this, I don't know if anybody remembers, you guys remember MySpace? And that's how we kind of kept in touch with each other. She was working on a movie set with The Rock. She was so excited because, again, you know, he was The Rock, right? So she was like, oh my God, you know, she would just say some like email me and message me like some crazy shit. I'm like, okay, yeah. I was like, that's cool, because I had already outgrown my wrestling phase. So I go and I tell her, I was like, so that's cool. I was like, why don't you just ask him out the way you're talking about it? And she says that, no. She was like, I worked with him, and now this is fast forwarding, because I told her, like, after the movie was shot, and I'm not going to sit there and say what movie it was, but after the movie was shot and finished, she was like, I asked her, I was like, so this whole entire time you worked with this dude for 6 months on a movie. I was like, and you didn't ask him out? You ain't try to like hook up with him or nothing like that? You know what I mean? I'm just sitting there saying, like, you know, you're a single woman, good looking woman. You know, The Rock is, at the time, she was like, no, because The Rock is an asshole. He is literally one of the hardest people to work with. He comes in and he's like a complete dick. Like, it's a complete different person than what people see. And I was like, say what? But then my mind didn't go back to the memory I had when I was younger and I met The Rock. Because it was just like, you know what? I was like, I had been over the whole wrestling thing. So it was just like out of sight, out of mind. So then she's telling me this. And I'm like, damn, he's like that? And she was like, yeah. And on top of that, he's a fucking womanizer. Like, he got more tail in 6 months, because I don't know if people know how it works working in the business, as they say it. And the only reason I know is because I know this person and they talk about it. A lot of times, when it's like any other job, when you're working, you're spending all your time with that group of people who you're working with on this film or TV series. So you see a lot and you do a lot together. And she was like, yeah, he's like a straight up womanizer. And it's real bad. It's like really bad. And then he's a jackass about shit. And he treats people like shit. And I'm like, nah. I was like, well, maybe he wasn't having just a bad day the day that I met him. Maybe it was just, now it's looking like maybe it's just he's an asshole, period. And then on top of that, on the set of the film, I'm not telling you what the set of the film is because I'm not trying to get, you know, in trouble about anything. But on this particular set, on this particular movie, there was a co-star who was supposedly given. The Rock was not a feature part of the film. He was a part of the film. Now, you guys may understand what I'm talking about, what film I'm talking about. He was a part of the film, but he was not a feature in the film. All right? And do you know that this dude was trying to, when he came on, he was like, no, he was like, the movie should be about me and my perspective, and trying to force out the main actors on the original film. Now, you're saying, oh, well, you're just making shit up. You're just making shit up. I swear to God, this is the truth. This is my truth, what I know, okay, about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Then fast forward a few years later, right? His name is even bigger than what it was at the time when he did this movie. And you start hearing stories about him beefing with co-stars. And it's the same thing, all right? I'm trying to take the spot in what I want to be the shine of this project. Whereas, even though the original creators of the project are the stars of the show, or the stars of the project, he comes in and he wants to do that. He does the exact same thing. The difference is that, and I don't know this to be true or not, all right, and I'm just going to sit there and say this, the woman that I know that works in the business told me that it was no coincidence when he first came on the Fast and the Furious project. Immediately after the first film, there were leaks about arguments and fights that were happening on set between him and Vin Diesel. Because Vin Diesel, if anybody knows about Vin Diesel is he's very smart with how he can and conducts his business. Those leaks weren't by like mistake, all right? People that were close or around the inner circle of Vin Diesel when it came to the Fast and Furious project had warned Vin Diesel about Dwayne Johnson coming on his project, because what he does is he tries to take people's projects, original projects, and spin them off and do his own thing. What is he doing now with the Fast and the Furious project? The exact same thing. There's no coincidence that those stories were being leaked out to the press, that Vin Diesel at times didn't even want to shoot on the same days as Dwayne Johnson, didn't want to be around Dwayne Johnson. There were times where they talked about their fight scene in the very first film where The Rock showed up. Remember when there were like just rumblings that they had got into it? I was told that they actually physically did get into it. Not in that when they shot that scene, but around the days of them shooting, they had to postpone shooting those particular scenes for weeks until it died down between the two. Why? Because The Rock came in, as he always does, and tried to take over the project. Now, let me move forward here and talk about what other issues I have with The Rock and how he has literally, primarily, black and brown people so snowed. The man is black one moment, then he's mixed the next. He's running for president one moment, and he's either Republican one day, and then he's Democratic the next. He's giving speeches at Republican conventions. He's giving speeches at Democratic conventions. He is a man who is up for the highest bidder. And yet, when Tyrese started to point these things out, now mind you, Tyrese did it in anger, which is primarily not the best way to go about things. But when Tyrese was telling you guys about him paying fans to stand outside and pretend that they were waiting all day, all of those things kind of was connecting the dots for me. It's like, yeah, I could see it. I could see him. And then him using the whole going to the Black Museum history conspicuously right after he talks about he's thinking about running for president. The guy is a snaky dude, and he has our community so snowballed. And I don't understand why that is. And I keep saying to myself, well, all you got to do is look at the pattern in history that he has with people. A lot of people sit there and say, oh, well, he's working and he's got all these projects, so he must not be that bad. Let me tell you, Dwayne Johnson has probably one of the best PR teams around the game. All you got to do is do your research as to when he divorced his first wife, why that was. A lot of that had to do with The Rock womanizing and doing a lot of shady shit. If you don't, his daughter, who's gorgeous, his first daughter is gorgeous. His daughter, if you look at her mother and you do the research about what happened between them, you think it doesn't strike you as ironic he divorces her right around the time that his fame kind of hit a new level? He's a nasty dude, man. He's a shady dude. So this is just my response to people who taking a dump on Tyrese saying like he's beefing with The Rock and The Rock is just this. He's this cool guy. And I'm noticing a lot from our community praising Dwayne Johnson. And you guys don't even get it that he's using our community. I mean, look at his storylines in films. He's never, ever just Samoan and black. He's always half white and black. Always. He takes his shit on his community. And you guys don't get it? Man, I already know about Dwayne The Rock Johnson. That dude is a hoe in many ways. More than one way. I'm out.